please welcome Catherine Bruhier, Christina Cox, David Thompson, and Wertheimer.
Good afternoon.
Look at all these healthy people.
Really pleased to introduce our panel this afternoon. We've got back for round two, Catherine Bruhier. We've got Christina Cox. Bob Wertheimer. And Dave Thompson. So just to get things started, maybe two things. Maybe, first of all, Dave and Bob, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your role on the show and what it is that you do. And then all of you, if you could maybe tell us just a little bit about, what comes to mind when you think about Due South, which was sort of 25 years ago.
Well, I'm Dave Thompson. I was the editor on the first two seasons of Due South. I did 22 episodes, and all my episodes were when David Marciano was part of Due South as well. And yeah, and Bob as well. So you didn't really see anything of me, and I never really met that many people on set because we had a very tight schedule on Due South. I just finished a show that we started shooting last July, and they just now, a year later, locked one of the episodes. On Due South, we used to lock at least, well, I think 9 days was the average.
So it's all your fault that now everybody has to deliver fast.
Yeah. After we finished shooting, 9 days was about our post schedule, and the shortest we had was on, I believe, Gift of a Wheelman was finished shooting on Saturday, and we aired on Thursday. So in the editing world, you edit every other show. So I would edit a show before I got back to work on the next episode, because it was a 7-day shoot. Before I came back to work, my show had already went to air. So I was like, wow. Anyway.
Somebody had to deliver that. It wasn't like you could, email it or,
No, that was hand carried to New York. Our supervisor would carry it to New York on a 1-inch tape and hand it to CBS, and they would air it. And it was that close that if we tripped coming back from the washroom, we'd miss an air. So that was my experience. Wow.
Well, I was a freelance producer, line producer back in those days, and I was pretty friendly with Jeff King. And what had happened was that Paul Haggis, who created the show and was the showrunner of the first season, did not come back for season 2. So Jeff and Paul's sister, Kathy Slevin, then moved up, which made that there needed to be somebody in the producer's chair. And because of pretty massive cost overruns in the first season, I was brought in specifically, and I think one of my mentors, which was a fellow by the name of Stefan Reichel, who worked for Robert Lantos, who, because Alliance was one of the co-producers of the show, wanted me to come in and perhaps offer the show a little structure.
That's a very gentle word.
And so there was somewhere in the neighborhood an overage that we carried over, financial overage of about $1.8 million from the first season into the second season. And I remember my interview with everyone, and I said, well, you're not expecting to find that money, all of that. And they were so savvy at what they were doing, they had already figured out how to remove it. But it was an extraordinary experience for me to come in and become part of something that had already found its way and had already established a quality bar that we had rarely aspired to in the industry at that time. And it was such a combination of terrific and tremendous people on both sides of the camera, in the editing room, in the producer's suite, the writing. Jeff and Kathy, we used to call them vampires because they would just work all day and all night, and all day and all night. And we would execute what we hoped was their vision. And then truly, the finest piece of television I ever had my name attached to was the Queen's Horses. And we literally shot the thing, you know, with the trains and horses and all of this incredible stuff. And it was like 8 days, 8 or 9 days. We cut it, locked it, mixed it, sound effects, color, everything, packaged it and conformed it and sent it out and aired it and nobody knew. And it was a remarkable collaboration, and I was fortunate because by that point, Due South was a machine. It just ran. You know, Paul was Paul and David was David and Jeff and Kathy were cranking out these words, and it was my job to execute. And it was an extraordinary experience. And I don't think much has eclipsed it in my career ever since.
Well, I can't top that. Yeah, it really was, to me, kind of the golden age of Toronto production.
Yeah.
We were shooting on film, and things looked the way that the DP intended them to look. They were like rich and luxurious, and the show was so beautiful, and so it felt so decadent in comparison to things that we grew up with. And I'm not knocking the Little Miss Hobo.
Careful, that was my first show.
I can still sing the song. I sing that song. They're like,
Let's hear it.
And you'll remember I got kicked out of the theaters. I also did I did a show with Bob as well called FX, and we had that same. They're talking about 8 days an episode. To me, that's like, oh. Because now they're like, you did it in 8. Can you do it in 4? And then someone does it in 4, and they're like, hey, can you shoot an hour drama in 2.5 days? Can you do it for free? So those to me were really great times because yourself really showed Toronto that the sky was the limit. There wasn't. It was great storytelling done very finely and with a very fine touch.
It set the bar really high for everybody.
Yeah, it really did. It really did, and it's pretty hard to surpass that. It remains one of my favorite shows. I only got to do 2 episodes, one of which was just down the street.
But they were the 2 best.
Oh, sure. I'm only saying that because I came. I added that.
You guys have heard these, don't say much, but yeah, Due South was a magical experience and definitely a fear and a big dream for me at that point in my career. I'd done a couple of things on TV, Poker Dot Door, we talked about yesterday, and a few other things, but mostly theater. So it was kind of exciting to be on something ongoing like that. It's very special.
And it's interesting, my mom, who I stayed with for a while visiting family, they all remember all those episodes as clear as day. And this is years later, and for it to have had that much of an impact, it's really remarkable because, there were plenty of other things I did in Toronto in the 90s that I don't remember. I know they happened because they're on the IMDb. I was what? Some things are, I do remember actually. I just remembered, I think one of the first things I ever did with Miles Dale. A show called Top Cops.
I remember I was supposed to do it, and I
That was my third show.
That was my very first show.
They offered me that show first, and I passed and recommended Miles do it. Miles Dale's a friend of ours, and he produced Shape of Water. So his career kind of, and so we always laugh about the fact that like I got offered his first job and gave it to him. And now I'm like, I can't carry his luggage. So y'all liked the show, did you? Well, really, thank you all for being here, because I've never experienced anything like this, and to see all of you people who enjoyed something that we contributed to, each of us in our own little way, that's really a thrill. It's really a thrill to see folks that were entertained by something that we did, because particularly when you do TV, it's a different sort of thing. Like when we used to make features, which we did both back in those days. You know, because the movie would be in a movie theater for 5 or 6 minutes and then gone. And then television is a different sort of thing, because it's kind of like happening all the time. And I remember once I did some series, it might have been in South, I can't remember. I was on a streetcar here in Toronto. And I'm going home on the streetcar. I don't know why I was on the streetcar because I had a car, but anyways, and I heard people talking about something that I had produced. And it was 2 seats over. And it was really a great feeling. It was really like you made an impact. You've done something. And so you're all here.
I think that for me is one of the only reasons to be in this business or to stay in this. It has to have an impact on people, or you're wasting your opportunity. You're wasting your breath. Literally and figuratively, because if you can't connect with people in such a way that they remember it 25 years later, for me, I just don't see the point anymore. And it's part of the reason why Bob and I were just talking about, it's not just about doing things, it's about doing things that matter to you. If you've never had an experience that really resonated with you and really resonated with other people, it's harder to find that. But when you see the difference in the way people light up around certain shows, you go, oh right, that's the brass ring for me, is to make that kind of an impact. And I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of things that really stayed with folks, and one of them, Bob just brought up in the elevator, was an indie called Better Than Chocolate. And it was like one of the first out lesbian romantic comedies. And I literally, like 3 months ago, went to a con in Las Vegas, and there was 6,000 people there over a film I did just after I did Due South.
And you were 11.
When I was there goes the IMDb. All the Botox in the world.
I was going to say that, just in coming to these, I find it so fascinating that, some of the people that are watching it were like babies when it came out to begin with, but they found it anew and are liking it and passing it on. There's so many people that I talk to that it's like, oh, I just started watching it because of such and such, and it's almost interesting to hear why you started watching the show that's that way. It's pretty amazing.
It would have been amazing if there were enough episodes that it had syndicated, and all of the joy that could have spread globally. It's tough for them. It's tough to distribute a incomplete package, but God bless YouTube. God bless all these outlets that allow things to be resurrected and redistributed and re-enjoyed.
We didn't have enough for syndication.
I think it was syndication for a
We had
while.
67 episodes.
100.
Is it 100?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's your
Mine just felt like 100.
For like a foreign, for a,
Everything's too hard.
correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it did, because the last season after you left would have made up that 100, because I know it was like in 62 different countries. And
Yeah, I think it was syndicated, but it was only, it says on IMDb here, 67 episodes.
Yeah, does it?
Eric and I did 44,
Oh,
and then
okay.
they came back to do 25. I don't know where that odd number came in.
Yeah, remember those 22, 25 episodes a season years, those are marathons.
Yeah. The average show now is getting 8 episodes, maybe 10 episodes, and they're more mini-series than and we used to always do. And on Due South, we would start in the fall. We would shoot through the winter and into the spring, and in June they'd say, see you in the fall. And we'd all go on holidays for the summer. We'd be back in the fall and start again. You know, and back in those days, the television was like that. You know, nobody ever got near your show. If you wanted it, you could have it back. It was like, see you later. See you in the fall, take the summer off. I don't know why we shot in the winter. Why you
But that makes me think of the beauty of being able to dole out a series week by week and enjoy it and have some anticipation rather than like sit in your bed and not shower for a week while you and then it's done. Yeah. Right? And Netflix gets their algorithm and you hope something works out, but then it's a year and a half before the next season comes out. You know, I have a little person now that when she gets to that place where she really enjoys the show, we're going to go 1 episode a week. So there's something to look forward to, something to process and think about week to week.
This is sort of how we all watched Game of Thrones this past
You didn't binge it?
Good way. So there you go.
Hello, sorry. Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm from England. I just want to say thank you so much all of you for coming as well. It's a thrill for us here to have you all here, so thank you as well.
Well, thank you for coming.
My question is for Dave, Mr. Dave, if that's all right to call you.
Yeah, I think that's what Michael probably called me yesterday.
I'm genuinely curious how you got into your profession of editing. Did you do something beforehand that led to that? Did you always know that you wanted to do editing? How did you?
It was bad luck.
Very quickly. I'm a grade 10 dropout, and I didn't have a job, and my sister didn't want me in Calgary, so she called in a favor and got me a job in a small TV station in Wayne. And I migrated down to CFTO in '73, and in around 1977, I was sitting in the cafeteria not working on anything at that point, and my boss came in and said, can you edit a show by yourself if I give you a script? I said, of course, and he sent me into a room with with a script, and I started editing with Lois Tobo. And that's when the drama started, and I cut for 5 years, and my career of editing was over 15 years. I had 3 shows. I had Lois Tobo, I had 90, and I had Top Cops. And that was my credit for 15 years, was 3 shows, 3 series. So that's how I got into it, and I just fell in love with editing. I love editing to this day. I just finished a short with Gordon Pinsett, actually, and who is a wonderful actor, and I finished a short with him that we'll be releasing. And if you ever want to see it, if you grab my email off IMDb, I'll send you a copy when it's done. And it's a wonderful show with Gordon Pinsett. And I did it totally for free. I didn't even charge a cent to do the editing because.
If you knew Dave, that's a big thing.
So that's how I got into editing. I just sort of, and I came from the technical end. So I'm an engineer first, a technical engineer, and then we started editing the drama. So I carry the ability to fix the machine as well as operate the machine, and I love both ends of it. And I love little dark rooms by myself with you know, nobody around. And I very seldom know the actors, and they certainly don't know me, you know, because we're just in our own little world, and I love cutting. I mean,
But I think it's important.
What's that?
Your full control, is it sort of like a character?
Well, actually, it's funny because I get my cut, and then the director comes and he dumps on my cut, and then the producers come and dump on the director's cut, and then the network dumps on the producer's cut, and then you guys hopefully don't dump on our cut.
So imagine for a second, which was more the norm on Due South, as opposed, like, I remember when we built the budget and the schedule for the show, we were anticipating a pattern of 6 weeks of post-production from the finishing of main unit shooting until air. And yet, because of all sorts of factors, we were backed into doing the entire post process in 6 days, 8 days, 9 days. People working 24 hours a day. Jeff would be in one room mixing, I'd be mixing a different reel in another room while we were still prepping the show that was going to air at the time, and casting and cutting the other show that just came off, and here's the call sheet. What, I have to do a call sheet report? Okay, let's go to that. And it was a remarkable factory, and it would not have been possible if it hadn't been for the quality of the people. You know? So particularly that tremendous Leslie Nielsen episode, the All the Queen's Horses, just to turn that thing around. It started with George Bloomfield being a very talented director, and the relationship between George and Paul and David, and the ability to work together like that, and Camilla, and then to then be able to live through that post factory and go to air, and things went through the roof. I mean, I remember the numbers on that one really high, and everybody was really, really happy and exhausted.
Feature.
Yeah.
It was a feature.
It really was.
Okay, I was gonna ask you this yesterday, Catherine, and I was too nervous, so we're gonna try again today, but Christina, please chime in as well. I was just gonna ask about like women on the show, and what it was like to kind of be, especially for you as Elaine, to be like this woman character who starts really on the side and then, you know, grows into her own as a police officer, although we only see it briefly. So I was just going to ask you to kind of speak a little bit about that, and also if you could just, what do you think her career went? Where do you think she's, just out of curiosity, have you ever thought about it? So.
I never really, back then, I never really thought about, okay, I'm a woman on the show and it's mostly men. Maybe I did, I don't remember. But, I mean, I always wanted her to do more. You know, I always wanted her to do more. Where do I think she would be today? I think she'd be working in Chicago PD. She'd probably be a detective undercover at this point, you know? Yeah. Probably married to a woman, I don't know. But yeah, no, it was a fun set. Everybody was really nice. I was shy. I mean, I still am shy with these things. But yeah, so it was a fun time, and for the most part, I think I was treated okay. I've done a little bit more with her character, but
I think just the fact that they were willing to cast a 21-year-old as a bank robber.
Yeah, that was
You know, kind of says it all about the way it was run. They were open-minded, and something that I think has changed, or that I notice has changed dramatically in the last 10 years or so. I feel like I'm very, very blessed to be the last of a generation of actors that could win the job in the room. And when I started out in this, I think I was just out of theater school when I did this. You know, you got your script, same with everyone else. They probably had people dream casting in mind, but you'd go in the room, everyone else would be waiting, and you'd go in there and you would see the producer, the writer, the director, the executive producer, the casting director, and you would have a reader, and you would jam, right? And you could feel it. And you could feel when you turned the tide in the room, and you're like, okay, that meant something, that one mattered. And then, you know, oftentimes that would be the one that you would get. Very often now, it's a camera and an assistant, and you don't get that opportunity to connect with people and change the energy in the room. And even if there was someone that was fancier, more famous, more whatever, or more popular at the time, the way the rooms were run, you could still win it. Like literally snatch that, you know, blue ribbon, whatever you want to call it. So I feel like that was what was different at the time, and it was reflected on set, because if you were that person who came in and knocked it out of the park, and you went to set, you did the same thing, you got the respect, and it was an equal playing field, you know. And I mean, I was just tickled to be there with all these really amazingly talented people, and totally not geek out and not being, you know, choking on my own tongue, trying to look fierce up against all these grown-ups. Hi. Yeah, that was being a woman in this situation. Never crossed my mind. I was being Morgan, you know, to the best that I could.
Yeah, I don't think I was aware of all that stuff at that point in my career. I think later I was, but I think at that, I mean, also too, you know, pretty fresh out of school, so I didn't really think of that yet. I wasn't jaded yet.
Hi, my name's Katie. My question's for Christina, please. So you were in the first episode of the series, and then you also were in the first, or one of the early episodes of the second series. So you had about a year between your first and second episodes. When you came back for your second episode, did you have any different impressions of the show, either from a production or a crew member standpoint? Like, you know, was it crazy the first time and it was organized differently the second time around? Do you have any recollections of differences like that?
Well, this guy. He doesn't say shit. You know, I can't say that I think my awareness is very different now than it was at the time. Like, it was so right here for me, and in the moment, both times. I was just thrilled to be asked back, you know. And you know, she'd been in jail for the whole time. So she'd been counting the days and scratched the little numbers. So she was just dumb enough to go out there and try the exact same thing, something very, very similar. I think she came back a little bit more jaded. But it was just a, you know, it was a pleasant and wonderful surprise to be asked back. So I was of course angling for the ways that Morgan could go straight or be an asset to them in some ways, so that I could come back and do that. Or that she could have a good twin. Who was Canadian and could be a Mountie. An exceptional dog trainer. Stranger things have happened. 6 feet under, it's all I'm saying. So, yeah. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again, Catherine. Thanks for coming back today. My question for all of you, it doesn't have to be, yes, it doesn't have to be due south here. For all of you, what has been the highlight of your career so far and why?
Well, I've been asked that. What's your favorite show or what was the highlight of your career? And it was always due south. I also cut the pilot of 24 and did some very successful shows. But as far as shows go, my favorite show, if I had to sit down and watch my shows again, some of them please don't make me, due south would be mine. I'm sorry, it was fun.
Yeah.
You know, it was fun on due south. On my demo reel, I have the shootout behind the car where the father tries to give Paul the gun, and it's an imaginary gun. Marciano says, "Is there an entire conversation going on here?" You know, and it's like, it was so much fun. And that cut of that went through, probably the editor's cut was what went to air. It was just so, I'm sorry, due south.
Well, my answer is a little more complicated. For sure, due south for all the obvious reasons that are sitting in this room. All the elements that we've all discussed, due south was a very special experience. And in the confines of that, for sure, and particularly the show with Leslie Nielsen and the horses and being able to overcome the challenges of the railroad and the trains and all that. But really, I was given a glorious opportunity to actually showrun a show that we shot in Cape Town for a year that aired here for about 15 minutes and around the world for a while. It was a sci-fi show way ahead of its time. And I think the first time that I heard actors say my words was when I really thought I had accomplished something. As much as Due South was an extraordinary, of all the works for hire, I would say that. And the other thing, I guess the other one was when I was starting out, my very, very first project was for a tremendous, highly regarded European director, Louis Malle. And I managed to survive, and I was the only Anglo on the show that survived. And I invented mistakes. Just invented mistakes. And so that being the first movie I ever worked on, and it got nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and I had my own little part in it, you know, like my little part of being a unit manager, location manager, and everything manager for like hardly any money. And I'll just indulge myself and just tell one little story from that movie before I pass it on. So
You have to tell us the name of
I know, it was
it was called Atlantic City. Louis Malle was the director, and I was like right out of school, and I managed to piss off everybody. Like I said, I invented And so I went to this hotel where we were shooting, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the art department was setting up where they were going to do a big scene with Burt Lancaster and Sean Sullivan. And I've got like, I was so green that I had like all of these 3-ring binders I'd carry around because they didn't know that you get rid of the pinks and blues and greens when they issue new pages. So I kept everything. I'm walking around with everything. And and I'm looking at my notes, and this isn't the right bathroom. The bathroom's down the hall. And so I said, get out of here. You're in the wrong place. And they're going, well, Louis told us yesterday to come here. I said, forget that, it's over there, right? And then I go out and do the rest of my job, which is like breakfasts and parking and everything else. And then it started to germinate in my mind that, did he say that Louis said to set up there? And I've changed a directorial decision. You know, the parking guy. So I kind of wandered back to set at one point, and they were setting up this huge sequence in the bathroom that I suggested. And again, I was the only Anglo that had actually survived this picture. And I remember opening the door and looking in just as he looked up from his script and caught me, and he said, viens ici, Robert. And walked up, and he whispered in my ear, he says, I'm much older than you, and I've seen too many bathrooms. That was the right decision. Thank you. He was a pretty classy guy. So that was my experience.
My favorite shows are the ones where I manage not to stick my foot in my mouth. It's a knack I have, I was born with it. I would say, for my time in Toronto, you know, Due South was a pretty spectacular entry. I had a lot of fun on the first series that I was a regular on. The only reason I can't say that Due South was the absolute favorite show for me was because I didn't get to be on it as much as I greedily wanted to. It's pretty hard to, I realized much later on that it's pretty hard to bring the bad guy back again. Unless it's Dexter and you're done, let's go. But I did a show here called FX, which was great, and so many great memories from that show. And then in recent years, ironically, Dexter was one of the most fun shows. And here's my anecdotal story. So I went to Ryerson Theatre School, which is just down the way. And Ryerson it's an excellent school. There's amazing actors have been you know, coming out of there for years. And I found myself as a multi-pierced, mohawked, a 17-year-old, not really knowing where I fit in at Stratford. And I wasn't an ingenue, and yet I wasn't mature enough to be, you know, the Portia or any of it. So I often found myself between the archetypes, and that's a funny place to be as an actor because casting and the storytelling is built on archetypes. And around that time, where I was flailing wildly there, a movie called The Last Seduction came out with Linda Fiorentino. And I walked during that movie and I went, there's a place for her there's a place for me. And I wrote down that director's name, John. And I was in Vancouver doing a really great series that I was very proud of. It did not go very well, didn't get launched properly, called Defying Gravity. And it was about astronauts. And, it was just one of those shows that you do for free. Everyone was amazing. It was so much fun to go to work every day. They hung me from the ceiling 16 hours a day in a rig for, weightlessness, and I was like, yay! Don't let me down, it's okay. And when we wrapped, I went back to LA, had an audition for Dexter. I walk on set. I am John Paul. So I was like, I need a minute. I went back to work. So that was a nice full circle.
Gosh, well, definitely Do South was a huge highlight that, placed me on the map and introduced me to a number of things, for sure. There's also a lot of theater for me. Definitely, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Andrew Murray, but I did a little play for him twice. He wrote the part called Riot, and it was about a group of Black 20-year-olds from different places like Nova Scotia, Vancouver, Toronto, living together. And it was sort of what happened in Toronto after the Rodney King riots, and how it affected Toronto. And it was actually written so well. He's so good at doing comedy mixed with drama. So it was actually a comedy drama. And the coverage and the press and the interviews from that was just opened a lot of eyes, and basically it was that the Black community in Toronto was not one monolithic community as it might be in the U.S. And that was an amazing experience for me, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. People called it like a Black Friends, but not as frivolous. Like I got to do it twice. Actually, I did it in between Do South at one point. Yeah. But so that was a huge highlight, and from there I worked with many people from that cast on different projects, and actually I'm working on developing something with Andrew right now. So I don't know, for me, when I do something, often you have to do things for insurance, health insurance, or to keep your family alive. But when you find a piece that you're doing as a passion piece, it's true, you can almost do it for free, And I feel like I bring a little bit of that to everything that I work on. Another one was when I got to work with Viola Davis on How to Get Away with Murder. That was like, because they're so secretive of that script that when I auditioned for it, and I was watching the show too, I was like, there's no James in this. Like it was the sides, and they didn't give you the whole script. The sides it was like a completely different scene, and when I got to set, it was like, oh, so the scene is actually with her, but the way they shot it, they kept going back and forth between scenes, that even though my scene was large, we hardly, it was mostly on her, but whatever. But she was so wonderful and so normal, and we had so many similarities, and that, we both had daughters around the same age, and second on with somebody that's had been married before and stepchildren and stuff. So that was a really special time. But this is magical.
I just wanted to mention, there we go. I just wanted to mention that actually in my University Canadian Studies course, we studied Riot.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So we didn't actually see the play, but we studied the script, and we were having lectures about it. So yeah, that made it into our university curriculum.
Yeah, it's a great script. Amazing, right? Yeah.
No, at London College, York University.
Must be Canadian, right?
Big thank you to the panel, everyone. My name is Anthony. I'm from all the way from Toronto. I just wanted to ask a question about the industry. So I grew up in the 70s, and I watched all those fantastic shows. My dad learned how to speak English watching the Lola's Togo. They're on the dog show. But when I used to watch, I used to know that it was a Canadian show. It was different than a US ABC or NBC. And due south, it was like an revival for me because Canada never played Canada and Canadians never played Canadians. And to see a Mountie with you see the flag, and it's impossible. Because I remember watching a movie in the 80s, it was with Michael Ironside. And it was, someone actually had a Canadian lapel on their shoulder in a space mission. And I thought it was amazing because Canada never plays Canada. So Due South definitely raised that bar where we could tell our own stories and it was interesting twists and turns. And I discovered the show in Australia. So I'd watch it with my Australian friends and they'd ask all these questions about Canada. And sometimes I tell them the truth and sometimes I tell a little fib about living in igloos and things like that. But I thought it as a watershed moment that finally the industry is maybe turning, that we can start doing things in Toronto, things in Canada. You don't have to go to Los Angeles. And now it's 25 years later. There's been huge disruption in the industry. Technology has changed a lot of things. Does the industry have the legs to maybe have like a niche market and they can launch things from home, homegrown products that aren't afraid to say, well, this is made in Toronto or made in Canada, not Toronto disguised as New York or something like that. So does the industry have that future? Where do you see things going and how we can use it as maybe like a little bit of an economic driver to get people interested in a job in front of the camera, behind the camera, doing editing and things like that. I'm just curious about that future. Thank you.
The answer to that is I think we're doing more and more. I mean, Frankie Drake is, we're Toronto. We're doing more shows in Toronto now where we're saying we're Toronto. And there was a time when I was doing other shows where we had to mask out the CN Tower. We couldn't see the CN Tower. We couldn't do a lot of things. And we're getting more, I think, shows, are we not, that are Toronto-based?
Yeah, Kim's Convenience.
Kim's Convenience, yeah. Private Eyes. Yeah.
I think, to me, and I've been in LA for the last 19 years, and I've been in Vancouver, and I hilariously did a show in Vancouver that was set in Toronto. Okay.
Why?
Okay. Why?
We cut around the ring.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think where I've seen colleagues and fellow actors and fellow writers kneecap themselves is by thinking that the issue is that we don't make things Canadian. You can't stick a maple leaf on something and make it a good show that's Canadian. You need to tell a really good story that you really know about. Because what will happen is somebody wants to do a cop show. They go, I want to make it a Canadian cop show. But it still feels like an American cop show. It looks like an American cop show, but they've slapped a Canadian flag on somebody. They're not telling organic stories that come from our experience, that also still have to be universal themes. So if that's the approach, then I think it's always going to feel, and it's going to feel forced. But if you are a Canadian with a Canadian experience, you inherently will have that perspective in the way that you create things. I think Australia has done a really wonderful job of creating their own content that's uniquely Australian without always going, look, we're in Australia. They're not like, look, a kangaroo. They're just telling a really good story from their point of view. And that, to me, that's where we can get in our own way by needing to make it Canadian.
Yes.
Wasn't Rookie Blue and Flashpoint set in Toronto about Toronto?
That's
So
right.
it's been happening.
There's the street names, right?
The coroner,
Yeah.
or whatever's the
Coroner.
set here, right? Motive, one of my best friends, her show, Motive, totally in Vancouver. The Murders is Vancouver. I think good stories told well will find their home. So I think that's where, if we keep our eye on that prize as opposed to, they have a huge difference in population. They have a huge difference in the way their cultural friction is so much higher that produces story and conflict. And I think that's why Due South worked so well, is we took all of the things that make us inherently awesome and crashed them up with something to create conflict. I think it's time for Due South, the next generation.
Hi guys, John from Australia. Don't be fooled by the accent. Two-part question. First one for Bob and David. What was your collaborative process with Jay Samko on the music of Due South and how it fit into the show and how you do that in such a short time frame?
A lot of the music that we did in the show was needle drop, and we played a lot of Sarah McLachlan, and we would cut a wild chase scene to
Practically hip.
yeah. I mean, and that was Haggis that did that, and then the rest of the music that the composer did, he was quite talented, and we would have a library and we would play with that music. So we, before Paul Haggis released the cuts that I worked with him on, it was pretty well there.
The music was signature. So what would happen is whoever was in the showrunner chair at the time, and when up into my season it was Jeff, would work exclusively with him. They'd spot the show. What that means is you air the show and you pick your spots where you're in and you're out, where you think you're going to do music, and you do temp music through the assembly process and through the cut. And Due South had such a strong signature theme music, complemented by the source music of Sarah McLachlan or whatever. And the fact that it was a US network show meant that there was sufficient budget to pay the publishing for those songs, which is fairly unique these days if you're not doing a mainline network show. So Jeff would have worked exclusively with him, and they would have decided we're going to go with no music here, or we'll go with library music here, or we're going to buy a cue. And then when you actually mix the show, sometimes, you know, I've done this too, where you just go, it's not working, and you drop it out and you do effects instead. But that would be the process.
Just one add to that, and we did an episode once where it was Que Sera Sera, and they sang the song through it, and the Mounties and Paul was busting through and coming through skylights, breaking doors down, and just going wild. And I went to the mix and they had covered it with sound effects. And I begged Jeff, I said, please, please try it without any sound, just the music. And that's what went to air, is what you saw. Because it was such a beautiful, yeah. And Holly Cole, I believe, was singing the song in that. And again, that's what Due South has done for me, because I can't remember last year what I did on any of the shows, but Due South, it's like I was there.
Was that one of the first shows to do needle drop popular songs into the show?
One of the first ones I did, I don't know.
Well, it was the signature kind of thing from a mood point of view. Like, you wouldn't tune in Due South and hear acid rock. You know, you would tune in to Due South and you would hear Sarah McLachlan in that kind of mood, because it was such an emotionally driven show. The things that were going on in Brendan's mind, the relationships between the characters. I think one of the main reasons the show worked was because of the emotional voyage.
Oh, yeah.
And so that music supported it. You wouldn't be doing rock and roll.
I believe we brought Ashley McIsaac in to play live to one of the mixes on Due South. I forget which episode it was, and Paul wanted it.
I'd like to just get back for a second, if you indulge me, to your question. Your question was far more complicated than you might even have imagined. But I'll just say this, because there's about a half an hour is what would be required to really answer your question. But Due South only existed with the content in it, the Canadian content in it, because of Paul Haggis. And the fact that he pre-sold the show to CBS. And then the Canadian network comes in after the fact. And the fact is that he had enough leverage, he was a good enough salesman, he was creative enough, the script was strong enough, his relationships were strong enough in California that it got made, and he persuaded them to I mean, it was unheard of. In those days, can you imagine, oh yeah, we're going to do a dramedy, and it's going to be set in Chicago, but really the lead character is a Canadian with a dog. And so I don't think there were very many people on the planet who could have got that done. And he did, and everything that followed and was based on the strength of that. Your question, though, touches on so many other factors of what we're all going through that this isn't the right forum for it. But I will say that when you question the existence of Canadian content in a network show, it's because the relationships are there and the people who make the decisions believe in something.
Just redact everything else.
And I guess the second question is to Christina and Catherine. Of your time on set, is there a particular person that you loved working with, or is there a fondest memory on set that really sticks out in your mind?
For me, absolutely. David Marciano was very positive and very much a mentor. He was just, I think because, actors in Toronto, we were so used to, it was a smaller pool back then, and so we would work and people would say like, oh, I don't do commercials, or I don't do this, I don't do that. Whereas David was so lucky and he was so thankful and so happy to be like, you don't understand, you're on a major US network show. This is a big thing. Whereas, a lot of people were just like, oh, well, my part's not big enough or whatever. And he just sort of put it in a different perspective for me. And then Malcolm Cross, the DP at a GFP, he was so sweet. I mean, it was, still fairly new for me to be on the show that often, even though I wasn't on it that much. And just little things like, this is a light that I'm using to pop your eyes. That was looking really well. Just little things like that. It's like, if you lean into this a little bit, of course, you forget it all when your camera's rolling into your character. But he was just really gentle in the way he spoke and very sensitive. He was great.
Yeah, he had a really nice way of, bless you. He had a really nice way of helping you understand how to better your performance without making you feel small.
Yes.
Which can happen, which was like, that's your light.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You're, like, you'll get stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, but there was 500 pounds. Just give me a second. He was lovely.
I think.
No, that's okay. I was going to say too that when I got into directing, that was one of the things that, because of him, that I always said to myself, I'm never going to be that director that's like, if I have something to say that I think might be sensitive to an actor, I'm never going to just like yell it. I'm going to go over and talk to them, maybe even have to whisper something in their ear, because it's such a personal thing and everybody reacts differently. So, and that really worked for me. I mean, I might not have been the director that knew all the different things about the lenses and stuff like that, but working with the actors for me was like wonderful. And my favorite part was the editing room in the end. It was like you can paint the picture and that type of thing and stuff like that. So, yes.
I don't think when Paul first started this show, they knew what they were getting with David. I think that David, certainly by the time I got there, which was the first episode of the second season, David Marciano took his character by the lapels and made it what it was. To the point that there was a bit of a disconnect between, I think, what the ambitions or what was envisioned by the two Pauls of what this show was going to be. I don't think in their original assumption of what the show was going to be, there would be such a buddy show. It was more Fraser's show, and the character of Ray Vecchio was interchangeable. But David Marciano, being David Marciano, would have none of that. And as each episode went by, his character became more and more entrenched and more established and more powerful. And by the time I got there, regardless of what any contract said or what any previous connotation was, it was a buddy show and it was their show by that time.
Which sometimes causes
Hi. So you've alluded to this a little bit in bits and pieces, but I'm curious in your opinion, not just on Due South, but in general, what do you think gives a piece of media staying power, like something like this has? Like, I'm curious in your opinions. We all have our own.
Everybody in the room.
Yeah, but I mean, like I was 3 when it first aired. So what do you think?
I feel very elevated.
There are people younger than me here, okay? So why, like, this piece of media or others that have had that lasting power with a group of people, what gives a story that staying power?
Character. It's always going to come down to character. It's always going to come down to storytelling and the effectiveness of the actors to translate what's on the page to an emotional voyage that we can all recognize and relate to. Everything else is bullshit.
I think there's a type of show that can go on for a very long time, but when you really look at it, like a lot of the procedurals that I love, it's really essentially it's the same episode every single time, and with a different bad guy, and you don't get to go home with them. And you want to go home with them.
I always wanted to go home with you, but you didn't get me.
So I think that the fact, I was talking about universal themes, and that's the story that can affect someone in their heart of hearts, whether they're in Australia or Toronto or Los Angeles or Mumbai. It's quality storytelling told well by actors that have been given the gift of a great script, that's been given the gift of a great showrunner, and
It is a gift, isn't it?
It really is, and I, without getting into some of the frustrating aspects of the business, I truly believe in alchemy. And you can put a show together based on when you get these people in a room and you know there's something there, or you can go and you can look and go, oh, well, they're number 500 on the IMDb, and this guy's got 400 million Instagram followers. They should be great on this show. And then you watch the show and it's gone in 3 or 4 episodes. I'm hearing now, a girlfriend of mine did a pilot in LA this year, one amazing lead on it, super magnetic. They hired an Instagram star.
Yeah.
And she got fired at the table read because she could not get a line of text out of her mouth, but the network was like, but she has 500 million Instagram followers. And she was like, oh my God, this is really hard. I have to know all this? How late am I gonna be here? Oh my God, I can make $500 million like this. And so that shift is super frustrating because what they've done is taken all the alchemy of it out. And you just, I believe if you guys demand it and you tell them with your wallets, you tell them with your viewership. So if you're not, the whole Netflix thing, I have to be careful about this because Netflix is doing some really great things, but I think entire series are being sold on a pitch because they know people are going to binge watch it because it's there. And they might go, like I watched a show and I thought, well, this is fucking awful. This got a lot of hype. It's still fucking awful. What the fuck is happening? And I went 2-3 episodes in going, everyone's raving about it. And I texted a friend, I was like, have you seen this? Am I losing my mind? And she goes, oh no, it starts to get really good around 6 or 7. I don't want to have to watch a show to get to 6 or 7 for satisfaction because there's only 10 fucking episodes. This show, out of the gate, like a race car, well-tuned, well-crafted. That to me is what you're saying, what it's about. And it's because its truth hit you in the heart like an arrow, and that's what we respond to.
Like you can only blow things up so many different ways. And that's true. And I mean, if you look at what you know, is making the most money in theatrical today. It's all the Marvel. Marvel is now the biggest money maker in the entertainment industry. But it won't do what you just said. I don't believe it's sustainable as individual stories. I mean, the kids can only watch so many things blow up so many times, and they'll all go to Comic-Con, but they won't be you, who come here and feel an emotional connection to a show because you felt an emotional connection to the stories and the cast. And maybe I'm naive, but I think in the long run that's more important.
Why not both? Exactly. Yeah, right? Why not dive a little deeper and then blow something up? I love to be a good action. We did 42 episodes of blowing shit up. Oh my god, I forgot there was children in the room.
They have earmuffs.
I have a 5-year-old, and let me tell you, she can put some duck work as a shame. She goes, oh shit, mommy, I just said fuck. Oh shit, I said it again.
It's not the other way around. Oh fuck, I said shit.
Any version.
Okay, this panel is just disintegrating.
I did have to, on the other show that we did, I did have to ask to stop being kidnapped. I was like, how many times can Angie be kidnapped? And before she figures it out, goes, fuck up. I am not getting in that family with you. I will roll the plate away.
Were you still on the show when we had the Curse of the Caribou?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that a story we can share?
Yeah.
How many of you heard it?
We got it. Yeah.
And we've had a couple of things that happened on Due South that were really freaky, like guys parking a transport trailer on the side of the road for no reason, like it was there. A guy ran in underneath and got hurt really bad. And they said it is the curse of the caribou. You killed a caribou in the opening pilot.
No, that wasn't me. I was in the next season.
Okay, because in the original series, the pilot that was shot, the two-parter, a caribou might have got killed. And they cursed the show. And there were several things that happened during Due South that brought sort of that, is that really a curse? Yeah.
The caribou curse?
The curse of the caribou. No, somebody passed it.
You had to bury it.
They had to bury the caribou, but it wasn't a live caribou that they buried there. It was dead.
Killed it.
No, they didn't. I don't believe they did.
You would never get away with it.
No animals were harmed at the making of the movie.
It would be shut down.
It's in the end credits.
The plane crashes thing, right? The plane, the twist in the back.
That would have been the first episode of season 2.
Paul was talking about it. Pilot.
One more comical accident note, the whiskey bottle that I had to throw, the scotch bottle, in the bank, they brought in a stunt thrower. Because must throw like a girl. So there was practice. It was supposed to hit the door frame. Practice. Being the actor. I said, do we have another one? Oh, please. Boom. Off the door frame. I was like, where's my stunt adjustment?
Okay, this maybe isn't the best question now, but in regards to like special effects, like nowadays so many of them are like CGI, so you wouldn't maybe necessarily have had the explosions, or you could have had like a little CGI Diefenbaker running around. Do you think that would have changed the show? Or?
You saw Twilight, right?
I think our show is very organic.
I don't think it would have made a difference one way or another because again, it was about the way the actors. It was. Don't you remember in Due South there was a high percentage of dialogue and a very quick delivery, and it was the banter, and it wasn't like a lot of shows that were effects driven. It was all these guys, right? So I don't think it would have made much difference one way or another.
We didn't.
I know I did an effects plate that never worked, no matter what we did. I did all the air-to-air stuff in the pilot, or the first episode of season 2, where they're going in the plane, the guy gets out and the plane crashes and he's blind and all that stuff. And so I'm doing all the air-to-air stuff with Larry McLean, who really should get credit for all the Queen's Horses, second unit director. And then we had to shoot this plate to do the parachute going down. No matter how many times we did it and how many times we went to the lab, we couldn't get it to look like a real parachute. So it's very quick. So there you go.
And honestly, it's really hard to respond to a green dot. You know, some of the explosions of the 90s in Toronto were quite terrifying on some of these shows, but you had something to respond to. I did The Crow out in Vancouver, and of course after Brandon Lee passed, we had no live fire weapons on the set, and they had just come out with fiber optic guns. Holy smokes, do they suck to work with. You're like, you feel like you're 5 going, because there's no recoil, there's no sound, there's no light, everybody's just like, oh, you fired, you're done.
Well, even if you watch the episode where they're shooting out behind the car, and I watched it, as I say, it's one of my favorite episodes when the father shows up. And if you notice, there's no flares on half those gunshots. There's a sound effect. We didn't have the ability to put a flare on back then. Now I could do it in the offline. But in those days, that was an effect that cost money, took time and everything else. Watch that episode and watch when they're shooting the gun. Half those guns don't have flares. Like you hear bang, bang, and it's like...
Yeah, because the blanks never gave you a muzzle flash.
No, there was no muzzle. And every other shot might have a muzzle flash, but not really. You know, and nobody said, hey, there's no muzzle flashes on those guns.
Dear CBS.
Now a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old would be watching the show, well, why isn't the muzzle flash there?
Well, you got all the muzzle flash you'll ever need on 24.
Yeah, we got a couple of those, didn't we?
Yeah. And the loss of hearing.
I'm sorry, I have another question.
Okay.
I keep asking questions. I used to be a journalist, so I come by honestly. Where was North actually filmed? The episode, the first episode of the second season.
First episode of the second season.
The plane crash.
It was the Niagara Escarpment.
Laura.
And it was, I don't know how the hell we did it, because the way the rules, I don't know how we paid for it. You had to haul everybody out there. It was expensive.
Do you have any favorite episodes? Anything that stand out for you that you love?
Well, for sure, the one with Leslie Nielsen with the horses, the musical ride, and trains. At that point, we had reached the pinnacle of efficiency. And Leslie Nielsen was, I was not experienced with the previous Leslie Nielsen episodes. So for me, it was a whole new experience, and what he brought, and the whole thing worked like clockwork. I mean, craft service getting on the train at the right time, the train hitting the right place for lunch to happen, you know, taking cars and rebuilding them, and this train going this way and that train going that way. In essence, having no limit on what we were trying to do, because it was Paul's will. Paul wrote it, if I'm not mistaken, and it was his will that we make this episode. And it worked, everything worked. And the song and the relationships and how the villains really pulled it off. And then there's the kiss on top of the train and the hat. You watch that episode, you can't stop smiling. It's for me, though. It's for anybody else.
When I was on doing the short with Gordon, and I walked him back to his room and saying I was the editor. He said, "Do South." I loved it. He said, but my favorite episode was the one he was in a restaurant and he was sitting, and Paul Gross kept looking around like this as we're going through the episode, but you couldn't tell what was going on. And Paul's looking, and the dialogue's going, and finally he says, "Dad, what's wrong with your hat?"
cut to a side shot and the back of Leslie Andrew's hat was cut off because when they buried him, they had to cut his hat off. So I made my girlfriend Vanna vow that when she buries me, the back of my hat will and that was his memory of Due South.
What, that's just like magic. Those genius little moments, that's what the show was full of. You know, and it was full of that even on set. And for me, because, you know, when I was done doing the show, I was on to something else, and I wasn't watching TV, I was working 17 hours a day. And it's the feeling of family on the set that's irreplaceable. And even when you're a guest star, you can really feel like an intruder in somebody else's house. And that's a very awkward arrow. This was just so welcoming, and that's what I take away from it. So,
who was your favorite?
I don't know, I was just thinking about that. I mean, obviously I liked, you know, ones where I got to do a bit more, but like from a viewer's perspective, I kind of like The Gift of the Wheelman. I really like that one. Yeah. There's just so many. I kind of like.
Victoria's Secret was amazing too. That was a two-parter again. That was so magical. And Eric and I intercut on that. We had, because of our limited time, he would be feeding me, because I'm a workaholic, so I'd be there 20 hours a day if I could. And Eric had a family. He had a baby being born. He had so many things happening on Due South. And that baby that was born on Due South is an Argo cheerleader. And he brought them over to, because I'd never met his family, he brought them over to my house. But we cut that one, and that was a beautiful, romantic show. And the music in there was just fabulous. And again, was that season 2? I'm sure Haggis was on that. Must have been season 1.
But Haggis, Paul show ran season 1 and directed 2 episodes in season 2. I remember he yelled at me so loudly that like my mother heard it in Montreal.
Did she say good?
One story, I can't remember the episode where they're paddling through the tunnel in the canoe. And that tunnel was a $50,000 bill that Paul said we had to have, and I don't believe it was that long a scene. And it was, if Paul said he wanted it, he got it.
Well, that's why he yelled at me, as I said no.
Oh, you said
It was about, he came back to direct the second season, and I was frightened and intimidated and, you know, worried that we wouldn't get along, because he was like God, right? He was big shot. And we got along great, And he was related to Diefenbaker. He phoned me from Los Angeles after, you know, we all got along really great, and he said, don't you think we need more Diefenbaker shots? And I went, well, no. And he said, well, yes. And I said, no. And then he started screaming at me, and, you know, because nobody ever said that. You know.
Diefenbaker was no German Shepherd, let me tell you.
well, there was multiple Deeps though too, right?
There's this reception thing I gotta go to, so I have to go. I'm sorry to have to leave, because I'm really enjoying myself, and again, thank you all for being.
Stay for a minute if you don't mind, just for a minute. So, guys, thank you so much for coming here and talking to us. But it was about the right time to move into our next phase anyway. So, thank you so much for coming here and talking to us about Due South. Really, really interesting stories, really interesting perspective on the industry and everything. We don't want to let you go empty-handed. So, first thing for each of you. We have a little poster that the fans, the attendees have all signed for you.
With my name on it.
And it's spelled right.
Which is unusual.
And Catherine got hers yesterday. So. and we have one more thing. So it's just a little gift for each of you. And of course, Due South features a cabin in the pilot episode, and it's about the north. So what these are actually, they're handmade, hand-painted.
They're fireworks. You get them.
So we want you to remember your time here with us. So again,
This is so awesome.